Inside the Arena is presented by Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel, Seattle's closest sportsbook.
Welcome to Inside the Arena, your source for everything off the ice, off the court, and outside the field of play. With your hosts, KOMO Sports Director Niko and KOMO Senior Reporter Chris Daniels.
Big show, big show. Everybody's applauding because it's a big show.
It is. Hey, you know, it's not like 2024 where there was like a different new coach for every program, but the one holdout from that, which is Jake Dickert at WSU, he is gone. His replacement is Jimmy Rogers coming over from South Dakota State. He is joining us live here in the Inside the Arena. I'm going to call it the Bill Fesh Inside the Arena studio.
Inside the Arena.
Presented by Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel. But if we ever wanted to name the studio, it'd have to be like the Fesh Studio.
It would.
Producer Bill's studio.
Yes, it would be. Fesh's Corner. Yes, yeah. Something like that.
We got to give a shout. You don't see him. He's off camera. But he makes this show happen every week.
Yes, he does. And
we appreciate him.
One thing we do every week, we're going to talk to Jimmy in just a second, but we like to do this every week. The four corners, yes, what is good, what is bad in the world of sports, off the ice, off the court, off the field of play. Besides Jimmy Rogers being in the studio, What's good this week?
That is a huge positive four corner, but you know, my positive comes out of a negative. It is the way that Ichiro handled one voter, making sure that he wasn't unanimous. And obviously we talked last week how great it was that he got in. And that you know, the whole unanimous thing ultimately becomes a footnote by the time you get to induction Sunday in July. But he has, in the days since, handled it with grace, even making the joke that I'd like to have that one right over to my house and have a drink and have a nice conversation. And it was, you know, I suppose you would expect nothing less from Ichi. And it was cool to see that. And I think in the long run, for a time where a lot of baseball fans, not just here in Seattle, but across the country, are so angry about it, it was cool to see Ichiro almost be like the calming presence. Like, hey, you know what, guys? I'm getting in. It's okay. It'll be a party in July. And the Mariners doing some really cool things on top of that, retiring his number 51. Yeah. That'll be in August. And so it'll be Ichiro, Edgar, Ken Griffey Jr., and Jackie Robinson is the only four numbers you can't wear. 11, 24, 51, and 42 at T-Mobile Park.
And you know what? Ichiro could hit at T-Mobile Park when it was known as Safeco Field. You know that?
I like that transition.
Yeah, that's the transition I'm going for because I think what's good this week also involves the Mariners, or at least Mike Petrelio, who writes for Major League Baseball. We've talked about this off camera and off mic, MajorLeagueBaseball.com, MLB.com. He wrote a deep dive, and Niko, I know you know a lot about this, on MLB's most extreme ballpark isn't in Colorado, and he gets into the numbers around T-Mobile Park. You have talked about this already.
Yes.
We talked about it on the show. The atmospheric conditions are one thing, correct?
Yeah, that's the thing with the little meteorology degree in my back pocket, right? Which is true. I'm not making that up, guys. So it's from that standpoint, and as you'll get into in a minute, there's a lot of different factors that go in outside of just the atmosphere, but especially in our colder weather, which is generally, you know, April, May, obviously the 3 games in March or so that you play, you're not only talking about cold air being heavier, thicker, tougher for a ball to travel through, but you're also talking about the moisture being a stone's throw away from Elliott Bay. That adds to it. So even in the summer, sometimes when it's warmer, you still have that extra, maybe you don't have as much heavy, thick cold air, but you still have that moisture, which is coagulating, to give you the best term give you the best term I can, banding together and making the air thicker and tougher to get through. So it's kind of a double whammy in that respect. And the story we did, this was last May on KOMO News, where it was the Mariners' winning percentage ticks up as the weather gets warm. When it's below 50, they only win like 46% of the time. When it's in the 70s, they win 54. Oh gosh, percent of the time. It was 53.7 to be honest with you. So when it's above 90, they win 66% of the time, which is only like 4 and 2. But the point is, the warmer it gets, the better they play, which in turn goes with the offense. But that story, I'm glad you brought that up because you have a lot more to touch on with how there's a lot of other factors within the dimensions of the ballpark.
Yeah, and it really was an interesting piece by Mike in terms of the science behind the math.
Yeah.
That's what, this is one of the things we like to talk about on this show is the stuff that's going on off the field in this particular case, because a lot of people have at this point, they know about the atmospheric conditions. You just went into great detail on that. There's a whole question about how the sun sets and getting in people's eyes. He gets into that as well. But one of the things that a lot of fans have noticed over the last few years, boy, the Mariners strike out a lot.
Yeah.
And the strikeout numbers have only risen over time. And he gets into detail on this. But he brought up a great point about all this, and this is the batter's eye.
Yeah.
That is that spot you see in center field. It's blacked out. That's supposed to help hitters. But it's not necessarily, according to his analysis, lined up perfectly. We've heard that also from Teoscar Hernandez about his struggles at the plate. But I thought this was interesting. He talks about there's some thought at T-Mobile Park that maybe it affects righty pitchers disproportionately given where they release the ball and the viewpoint. And it's worth noting that the Mariners built a staff almost entirely out of righties to an extreme. Last year, just 6% of Mariners pitches came from lefties, which is the lowest any team has had since 2016. He talks about the batter's eye, and that of the 30 parks in use in 2024, he counts 24 of them that had batter's eyes that were perfectly straight, meaning 0 degrees to the left or the right. But T-Mobile Park is one of them that has a getting farther towards left field angle of 12 or more degrees, along with Baltimore and Cleveland. And that may be a factor why the Mariners are having problems at the plate, and certain Mariners are having troubles at the plate with strikeouts.
And there was an admission from Jerry DiPoto, I believe it was right after last season. He said, we made the mistake that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they need to find players that are tailor-made to their ballpark and not the other way around, so to speak. So at least they've acknowledged it. Now, maybe they can hopefully make some signings to that regard soon, or trades that may be on the table for that team. But a really interesting dive, because so much of it, when you don't consider that, can be perplexing, right?
Yeah.
And I think this at least offers a partial explanation to those struggles, especially the strikeout rate, or why a guy like Teo Hernandez has been awesome before and since Seattle, and then had, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, and we know Ichiro can hit, so people can hit there. It's just
Yeah.
it's interesting, the science of it.
Yeah, I mean, like Cal Raleigh has been amazing at T-Mobile Park, right? It only affects certain people, and now you got to keep that in mind as you pursue potential future Mariners.
So again, that's a positive just on that piece. We can check it out. Very deep dive. What don't you like?
Can we go for the Mariners like inside the bases here? Because my negative was like, listen, we already know that it was one voter that kept Ichi out of being the first position player to be unanimous. My problem with it is like, what was that one writer thinking? And that's the negative thing here. And this is more of a baseball writer thing than anywhere else. I am not talking about any of our local folks who all do a real stand-up job. I'm talking about the Ryan Divishes, Adam Judes, Daniel Kramers. Those guys are all great. That's not who I'm talking about. But baseball, and you know this more than any other sport, there's this sort of like media thing where it becomes certain writers are like, well, you didn't do this. Or if Babe Ruth wasn't unanimous, Ichiro shouldn't. And I suspect that's why Derek Jeter wasn't a few years back as well. And there's just kind of this, and there's almost like a resistance as, listen, Rob Manfred is far from perfect, but he's at least trying to modernize the game. And it feels like anytime he does that, which is, in my opinion, necessary with, you know, people with this at the ballpark, right? I'm holding up my phone for the audio audience. You know, there's just kind of an old-timey feel to it. I'm not talking about age. I'm just talking about the approach. And I feel like that's the reason Ichiro wasn't. There's one writer being like, you know, which literally was one writer, you know, holding out that old school approach. And that's my negative on this. Like, that's the reason baseball has this catching up to do is that mindset. And it reared its head one more time in 2025. Hopefully not for much longer, but that's my negative. Not just the fact that he was one vote away, but the mindset that you have to really envision and how it pertains to this not getting Ichiro in unanimously.
Well, I echo what you said, but I can't bring it home with another baseball one this week.
That's okay. It was a triple.
Well, it's a triple. We'll talk about, to close it out, a negative, and boy, I feel for the Kraken right now. Watching this objectively at the Capitals game, I was there. There was no energy in Climate Pledge Arena. It really felt like the blahs had set in on this season with the fan base. You look at the TV numbers. The TV numbers have not been great, at least in the Seattle market. Buffalo game had a .74 share, 15,000 people watching. LA Kings, a 1 with a 4.6 share. Detroit, a .5 with a 2 share. They've been struggling, at least on over-the-air broadcasting. Again, we have to clarify all of this, that a lot of people could be watching on Amazon.
Right, we don't get those numbers.
We don't get those numbers, but when you combine that with what I just felt in the building, in a 3-0 loss against the Capitals, it really feels like the blahs have set in here in January. It really feels like something significant has to change on the ice. What that looks like in the front office, I don't know, but there are some unrestricted free agents. Yanni Gourde gets talked about a lot. It feels like change is coming and change is needed so that they can keep the fan base engaged and keep them spending hard-earned money on the merchandise.
Well, that's just it. It's not a cheap ticket, and understandably so. It's just, beautiful arena, all that stuff, but it's a lot easier to fork out that cash when you're having a 2023 season, right? When you're on the doorstep of the conference finals, than it is when you're, hey, we can get within 6 points if we get a couple wins of a wild card spot, right? And there's still time, but to your point, that there has to be something tangible. And it feels like we talked about this on last week's show. Every time they get close, it's like, there's some kind of setback.
Yeah, the couple of wins and then a couple of bad losses later, and
the consistency.
The blahs, you felt it in person, I think, at Climate Pledge. Speaking of Climate Pledge, another thing we like to do every week before we get to Jimmy Rogers, we like to update everybody on the air horn that may play at Climate Pledge Arena sometime in the soon the Supersonic Minute. As far as an update from NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, there was a minor one this week as he was in Europe for a game overseas in Paris, and he was asked by the local media there his interest in European expansion. We're not talking about here stateside, domestically, Seattle or Vegas. We're talking about potentially a new league sponsored by the NBA in Europe. And he did say that there are discussions going on with the NBA and FIBA. The EuroLeague appears to be stabilized now. There was a question whether the NBA was going to take over the EuroLeague. He has been quoted as saying they have no agreements in place as of yet. They're not ready to make any additional announcements about expansion in Europe until they can figure out a path to move forward. He also said, and this is where it pertains to Seattle, that he believes the NBA remains on track in the process as far as European expansion, and that the league's governors would be briefed further at their next scheduled meeting in March.
So the question everybody listening is going to ask, and so I'm going to ask you, how does that impact the potential expansion and hopeful return of our Sonics?
I think that's all separate, but where the European expansion comes into play is why the NBA wanted to be on Amazon, why they want to be on streamers. So there's better access to the content in Europe, where the NBA is right behind, well, I shouldn't say right behind, but second to soccer in terms of interest and growing the game globally and the merchandise sales and all of that. That is where European expansion comes into play. It is not competing necessarily with the whole question of Seattle and Las Vegas.
Good to know.
Yes.
You ready for this interview?
I'm ready for this interview.
Coming up, Jimmy Rogers. Can't wait.
Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel, Seattle's closest sportsbook, is your place for a true in-game betting experience. Download the Snoqualmie Casino Sportsbook app to get in on the action while watching your favorite games at Snoqualmie Casino. Details at snowcasino.com. Seattle's closest sportsbook, Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel.
You gotta do the applause, right?
Got to do the applause. Big guest, big guest.
Yeah. I mean, there's about 7 people out there. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, you said it. It's an awesome time. Jimmy Rogers, new head coach of Cougs football. Thank you so much for being with us. We know how busy you are, so we appreciate you coming on this side of the mountains to chat WSU football with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's just get right down to it. I mean, the world of college athletics right now, it's a whirlwind. 1 week you're in the FCS playoffs, the next you're trying to help rebuild a program that's in all sorts of new state with trying to rebuild the Pac-12 and everything like that. So tell me about this first few weeks on the job, what it's been like for you, just trying to get things rolling.
Yeah, it's been great. The people of Pullman and just the whole, support at Washington State has been awesome as far as our whole staff coming on board and getting to know us and then spending time with the players. So this whole process has really been about trying to get to know our players and the current team as much as possible, and then obviously recruiting. Recruiting is pivotal at this time of the year, and trying to get the mid-year guys into school and get to know them and be competitive come the spring ball. And I'm excited for that. Guys are training right now and strength and conditioning and winter conditioning. So it's going to come together here soon. March 1st we start.
Yeah, that's just it. And it struck me a little bit from the standpoint of you spend so much of your life at South Dakota State. Obviously, it's always going to be such a special place. Now that it is, again, a few weeks in, how do you feel wearing different colors, being in this new journey where you can put your imprint on this program and make your mark at a new place now?
Yeah, I mean, South Dakota State will always be a part of who I am. I'm 19 years of my life there. It's over half of my life in one spot. So that part is huge, but obviously the opportunity to come here, and it is a little different maybe wearing my wife says, "You look good in red," and I say, "It's not red, it's crimson." So, yeah, it's exciting. This is an opportunity of a lifetime, and I look forward to, the future moments with this team.
Why decide to make this jump now to Washington State from a place that you love, that you were fully ingrained in? I mean, Pullman versus Brookings, South Dakota. Why?
It's very similar. I think it's the opportunity to do it with the staff that I love and take this next step in my own journey to try to, accomplish a dream, which is to go to the college football playoff and compete for the ultimate championship in college football. And Washington State has a national brand to be able to do it in a very similar place that I just came from, and a place that myself and my wife could raise our kids in and feel good about. And that's really what it came down to.
As you look, obviously, at the pieces you have in place and the way you can bring guys into a place, like you said, that has tradition, like WSU. And one thing, in this age of so-called super conferences, you can be in a league like the Pac-12 and have a really good year and get to the playoff. There's potential. I don't need to tell you that. What is, similar to what Chris said a minute ago, what is it about the potential of Pullman, the potential to put your stamp on it, that you can take it to the playoff that is so appealing? Like, it feels like, if you get things rolling, there's a lot of great things that could come your way in that regard.
I think when you can recruit to the people and then you bring them to a town like Pullman where people are passionate about wanting to succeed, not just in football, but all athletics, it is unique and it is special because not every place is like Pullman. And the commitment of the culture in which you can create there, I think it is about relationships and kids wanting to stay there and stay there for more than just what I feel like college football has turned into a little bit, which is the pay for play, and I think there's more to it than that. If you invest in people and you love them, you can have a result that's really special.
How has that message been received on the road so far?
You know what? I don't even if players are wanting to get into something because of the financial gain that they could have. Maybe Washington State isn't for them. Not that our effort won't be in that, but that's not how I'm going to start a relationship in which we expect to be 4 to 5 years, which we're not going to start in a transactional form. It is about an investment and a commitment to people, and as much as that we're going to pour into them as coaches, they got to be willing to pour back into the program.
Speaking of the arms race, and you just alluded to it, I mean, it is a bit of an arms race right now in major college football, and we don't need to tell you that, but on your resume at South Dakota State, people talked about the fact that you had guys that could go get a paycheck somewhere else, that could have gone to the next level, to the football championship series or football bowl division, yet they stayed with you at South Dakota State. What were you telling those guys that it translates now to Washington State University?
Yeah, I never had a conversation where I immediately told the kid that's a bad deal and this is why. I never once did that. I'd always be a part of maybe the ones that were really contemplating leaving. It was always a decision on what is best for them and just being a sounding board for them to discuss what is going on in their own head. And then I would put my spin on what I think what was best for them. We just happened to not have players leave there, and I think that's because of the family feel in which they felt there and what we did for them as coaches. I think when you invest in people and there's a relationship and they know that you love them, I think that, there's more than just a dollar amount that, there's things that money can't buy, and a lot of times that's love and an investment of an individual. Yeah, I think it's unique, and I think you could do it in Pullman.
You've won every, which way at South Dakota State. And if there was a secret to that, everybody would do it. What is the biggest difference in having a winning program? I'm sure there's a lot of different things that went into your formula for success, but what is that biggest thing that led you to success at your last school and that you're going to implement here on the Palouse?
I think you got to evaluate talent. You got to bring that talent in, and then they got to know that you care about them more than just a number. It is an investment as far as a holistic investment into people, and trying to marry a whole football team is 100 and what is going to be 5 different people on the team, and then your staff, and you got to become one, and that takes time.
What does that mean in terms of offensive strategy? Because one of the things a lot of people talked about is the idea that those Mike Leach teams drew people to Pullman. That Pullman, the football is the front porch for a lot of people to get to the university, and they want to see exciting football. Mike Leach provided that. We know what his offense looked like. What is your offense going to look like that potentially will draw people to Washington State?
Yeah, I think winning draws people to Pullman. I don't know if it's a particular type of offense, although he was very successful in doing it. I just believe in being balanced, and I say the word, we're going to run the ball, and everybody thinks that we're going back to the 70s. We're just going to be balanced and try to exploit people's weaknesses on defense. And I think to be balanced, you got to be able to run the ball, and you got to, in order to have success long term, you have to be able to run the ball when the weather changes in the later months. So I believe in winning, however it need be. Style of offense, we're going to put the best player or the ball in our best players' hands, and we got to see what that is come spring ball.
I was struck by certainly the outcome of the Holiday Bowl wasn't the result, but it was the way the coach had left. There was a lot of guys in the portal, and those guys fought with everything they had, and it was against a really good team that ended up winning 10 games. What have you noticed? I listen, I know you're not on the practice field yet, but what have you noticed about that culture in Pullman, the way that these guys fight for one another and that sort of thing? Because it is such a huge thing, and it really, I think, rallied the WSU community behind that team, and I've never seen a fan base so proud of a team after a loss like that, but it's because of all the circumstances and the way they fought. So what have you seen in that regard?
Yeah, I think the guys' spirit was on display, really. I think Coach Dicker did a good job as far as developing a culture there that the players bought into to where they could display that in a tough time. And I do believe that culture is not always about the highs. Anybody can be successful or have a certain level of spirit when things are going in their favor. I think culture is shown when you're going through tough times, and that team, they were going through it. Somewhat of a depleted roster, or guys that had made a huge market throughout the season weren't on the field in that game, and then to have not their whole coaching staff and attendance coach in that game, I think that's tough. But the players showed up, and they had a certain level of spirit to them, and fought for 60 minutes in the game, and that got me excited watching that game, that I was going to be walking into a place with that played with a certain level of edge and spirit to them, and to have a lot of those guys have the conversation with me and want to stay as Cougs, I think that's pretty awesome.
And Zevi, one of those guys, right? He looked great in that game. Then the last thing you said is exactly the next question I wanted to ask, is that, that happens and you come in, you've got guys that are saying, okay, I like what Coach Rogers brings to the table, we're staying. How can that be a foundation for everything now moving forward?
Yeah, I think the team has been really supportive as far as I was a little nervous to just, I'm coming in, I'm a new coach, but I'm also bringing my whole staff. And then there are a couple of South Dakota State players that decided to come as well, and what that could feel like to the current students that are there, the current team that's there. I could feel them maybe being uneasy about it, but they've been great. They've been super supportive. Our first team meeting had a lot of spirit to it, and just the energy was quality. And I'm excited for the future of what we can do together.
As the CEO of the football program now, you talked about financially how this is a different situation than your previous stop. What conversations are you having with alumni, with donors right now about staying competitive with, especially right around the bend, a new Pac-12 and a bunch of new schools that you'll be competing with?
Yeah, I think it's important to find out what people want to invest in, because there's so many things that can be invested into, whether that be scholarships or the NIL or, the collective. There's so many different avenues, facilities. You got to gauge what people are interested in, because there's a need in all of those areas now in college athletics. It's not just the players. It's always staying at the forefront of what college football has become, which is all of those areas: scholarships, facilities, the NIL market, and then just overall your ability to help a kid through financial, needs.
When fans watch your teams this fall, what's that takeaway you want them to have? Like, hey, Coach Rogers' teams play like this. What's that identity you want fans to leave Martin Stadium with?
Yeah, I think toughness, a certain level of toughness. It's crazy to ask that because I had the privilege of sitting in a lot of interviews throughout my time at South Dakota State, and I remember my defensive coordinator really asking an interviewee, what do you, that same exact question, and he didn't know how to respond to that, and I answered that question in my head a long time ago, and it's been something I've hung my hat on, is a certain level of toughness when you step on the field, and really what that looks like to me is a team that puts them, the team in front of the individual goal, and everybody understands what they're supposed to do, and then they have the ability to focus for 60 minutes in the game to finish.
That's like a match made in heaven with the grit of Pullman, right?
Well, I would say I fit Pullman, just my background and where I've been and what I've become, honestly, in my journey at South Dakota State.
But have you been to Cella's yet?
I haven't. No. I just got asked what was my favorite restaurant before it threw me for a loop. I've been living in the office, really, but I've been to some really good ones there in Pullman. I haven't been there. You may have to throw me a
If you want a good calzone,
Okay.
you got to go to Cella's.
Okay.
There's a lot of good places downtown as well.
Awesome. I'll have to take you up on that.
I'll admit, I was skeptical when he told me about that my first trip to Poland. I'm like, I can't be that good. It was that good. It was all right. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and you're on the blitz right now across the state. How important is this for your staff to meet high school coaches and really build out the program that way? Yeah,
I think it's extremely important. I think in-state recruiting and then recruiting all areas within a 6-hour radius is important. Those are the players that are most likely going to have a natural feeling of what Washington State is about and have intrigue to go play close to home. That's your best shot at keeping people, is when you can play in front of their loved ones. And so recruiting the state will be pivotal for us moving forward, and had the opportunity to see a lot of high schools this week and get to know the coaches and players that are there.
Even just walking through our newsroom on the way to the studio, I was like, "Oh, there's a Coug. There's a Coug right here too." The program has support, just not just across our state, but across really the region as well. How special is that from the standpoint? Like, listen, it happens in Pullman, but it feels like everywhere you're going, somebody's saying "Go Cougs." Even the security guard as we were walking you in. How cool is that part of it for you?
It's pretty awesome. I feel like every place that we've been to this far out here in Seattle, I'm like, whether it's the principal or the coaches, and not just them yelling out "Go Cougs," but coming out of their way to say hi to our coaching staff and being invested in us as coaches, I think is really cool.
Well, everyone knows their way back home, right?
Oh, well played.
Yeah. And you'll find you'll hear that a lot, I think, in Pullman. But I think you should tell recruits it's always this sunny in Western Washington as well. That'll help get the recruits from outside the state, because we've dialed up the good weather for you on this.
Did you?
Blitz. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the weather here is nothing like the weather back where I just came from.
I was just going to say, it's not South Dakota weather.
No, people think that this is cold, or I can show you what cold feels like.
Yeah, I hear you there. Jimmy, it's exciting to have you here in studio, and I look, from just a football observation standpoint, we were talking in this conversation about the transition period and the new Pac-12 and all these different things. This is a really exciting time to, as we said earlier, put your mark on a program. I mean, from that standpoint, I know you're focused on the day-to-day, whatever that is, and really minute-to-minute for you in your position, but can you look at that in the big picture and say, hey, we've got this opportunity, we're revamping WSU football, and going into this new revamped Pac-12, and we can really set this thing going forward. How cool is that from the big picture opportunity?
I think it's awesome. But I'm also so focused on what you just said, minute to minute, because I don't try to put things too far out in front of me. I try to be focused on my day-to-day and where my feet are at. But I am excited to answer to your question. I think this is an awesome opportunity to try to step into a new arena and have success and represent the brand of Washington State. And we're going to have the opportunity to do that this fall, and with a new team and a new staff. So it's exciting.
In this new arena and our show inside the arena. Well played, Coach.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll go big picture. We can't wait to see you this fall. Always special to be on the Palouse on a Saturday in the fall. He knows it a little bit more than me, but I've seen it enough to know it's pretty awesome. Thanks for coming by. We really appreciate you, Coach.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks,
you.
Coach.
Is that guy not perfect for Pullman?
I think when people see him in person, if they watch this over again on YouTube, and if you're listening at home, you just want to see that guy talk.
Yeah.
He seems like a football player through and through, and now a football coach through and through.
Even just talking to him off camera, like, he just strikes you as a guy who should be a football coach in Pullman, Washington.
Yeah, he seemed like a Coug sitting this close to him. So.
Yeah, that was cool, and how fun for our show. Of course, last week we have the year one update with Jed Fish. Now we have, of course, Jimmy Rogers on, and we have some exciting episodes already planned for the next few weeks. I can't wait to bring folks that. But yeah, Jimmy Rogers coming over across the state in the winter, no less.
Yes, it's going to be fun. And you know what else? We're almost out of time, but there's a thing we like to do as well.
Yes.
It works. The buzzer works. There we go. The buzzer works.
I don't know about a second. There
we go. All right, the final buzzer. Final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts is, listen, we were just talking about Jimmy Rogers a minute ago, and you heard that our questions for him. This is, by far, as you know, the most transitional, crazy period in college sports. So when you look at it in this regard, what a time to be taking over the reins. And this is, without question, the most impactful and pivotal time in Washington State football history. You can make that case for a lot of schools, but especially what the Cougs are fighting through starting this new league. So we appreciate Jimmy coming out at this critical juncture, and let's see how he does. Let's see how he charts, which direction he charts the course of Cougar football.
I'm really curious about his answer on the offense and what that's going to look like. I think it's going to be different for Coug fans.
Not going to be the 70s, he said.
It's not going to be the 70s, not going to be ground and pound, but it sounds like it's going to be a mixture of it all, and ball control. That's what I heard, ball control.
Yeah, you do it. And I got a call for David Lee here.
You've been listening to Inside the Arena with Niko and Chris. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. Until next time.
Inside the Arena was presented by Snoqualmie Casino and Hotel, Seattle's closest sports book.